Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Today I'm going to be filming another one of my adoption series videos. So if you haven't seen the first one, please go check that video out. I will link it down in the description box below. In today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal struggles with adoption because I didn't really touch on that last time when I was telling you my story. So I'm going to start with some of the more like low-key stuff and then get into the more like deep stuff. Yeah, all right, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is kind of me as an earlier age in relation to my birth parents. So most of this information I got from my mom, and I remember some of it but not all of it. So when I was younger, I didn't really have as many struggles as when I got older. I was always so happy to be adopted. I was excited. I loved it. I loved talking to people about it. Everyone at my old elementary school knew I was adopted because I always made this big deal about it. So one thing that I think it's important to know is when it comes to adoption, it's important that people know that it's okay to be happy and sad. It's okay to have mixed feelings about adoption, because I definitely had mixed feelings about adoption. So something that I used to do when I was little was I was very sad because I didn't really know anything about my birth parents. According to my mom, I was sad because I couldn't look them up in the phone book, so I would make pretend phone calls to them, and I would say some things like, "Hello, birth mother, I miss you and I love you even though you couldn't adopt me," because apparently I thought that everyone was adopted. And then when I went to go adopt my sister, my mom told me that we couldn't see my birth parents. And so I said, I wonder if we'll see my birth grandparents. So when I was younger, I was very like into knowing who my birth parents are, meeting my birth parents. I would write letters to them. I would draw pictures of them. And like, I would talk about them every day. I would ask questions like, why couldn't they keep me? Do I have siblings? I wanted to know so much about my birth parents. I even asked, if my birth parents died, do you think an angel would come and tell me? And then when the earthquake hit in China in 2008, I was worried about my birth parents. So I was very, very in touch with my birth parents, and like, I very much wanted to know them. As I got older, especially closer to my last years in high school, I definitely feel like that has decreased. I do not think about them as much as I used to. I don't even know if I want to meet them anymore. I definitely don't write letters to them anymore. I still think about who I look like sometimes. When I was younger, I used to stare at myself in the mirror and think about, I don't know, I wonder if I look more like my mom or my dad. I definitely don't do that anymore. So if I was asked, do I want to meet my birth parents? I really don't know the answer to that, because I think it would be interesting to meet them, but at the same time, it would be weird. Like, I wouldn't really know what to say to them. So I don't really have an answer to that question. So that is my experience with birth parents. So now I'm going to talk more about my hardships that I've gone through. So one thing I am lucky about is that I was never bullied for being adopted. Some of my adoptee friends have been bullied for being adopted, but it's like, why, you know? Like, that's such a weird thing to be bullied about. It's like, okay, so I'm not related to my mom, so what? You know, like, it's not that big a deal. But I have been bullied for being Chinese, which was really tough to handle. But other than that, I would say I haven't had very many struggles with adoption. I've always been open to it. I have never gone into any states of depression or anxiety because of my adoption. I think the hardest thing for me was being around so many people that I couldn't really relate to until I was a teenager and I found an organization where I could relate to so many other people. And it was always hard for me in situations where people would talk about their families because I couldn't really do that. And I think one of my biggest struggles was talking about family history and family trees, because although I love knowing about my adoptive family history, I know nothing about my birth family history. I mean, I make family trees all the time using my family, like the family that I know that I've grown up with, but I don't know anything about where I come from or who I come from. I mean, I know the city I was born in, but I don't know anything about my family, and I think that has been one of the biggest struggles for me, because I've always wanted to know my past, and I did take a DNA test, but that didn't tell me much about my family. It told me a little bit more about where I came from and my DNA composition, but I still wish I knew more about my family. I think that's been one of the hardest things for me, is getting assignments in school about family history and family trees and not being able to feel like I can complete them fully. Like, I love my adopted family, and if I could make one big family tree with my adoptive family and my birth family, I would totally do that. And another thing I've struggled with is being in situations where people show photos of them or talk about how much they look like their dad or what traits they get from their mom. I can't really do that, and that's always been very hard for me to deal with, because it makes me feel out of place in situations. And it's just hard for me to relate and to have conversations and like keep those conversations going with other people. Some other things I've had to deal with are annoying questions. I will do a video on questions I find annoying, but it's just irritating to try to answer the same questions over and over again. And while I do love to educate people about adoption, it does get tiring sometimes, because it's like, how many times can I explain to you like what it is and what it means and all this stuff? And it's like, people who aren't adopted are trying to tell me all this stuff about adoption, and I'm like they don't even have the experience, and so that has been annoying to me. One more thing with my personal struggles, there have been moments where I've gone to family events and it feels really weird. I'm not very close with my adoptive family, like my extended family. And it always feels kind of weird going there. Like, I feel like they forget I'm adopted, but being adopted is important to who I am, and sometimes I feel like they disregard that and they kind of don't think of me as Chinese, which in a way can be a good thing, but at the same time, it's like, I am Chinese, I am adopted, and it feels like they don't really notice that, and it's almost like, I mean, I'm glad that they think of me as, you know, like part of the family, because I am, but there have been moments where I think they forget sometimes, and I really wish they didn't, because it is a part of who I am. So one of the more deeper and more frustrating and more angry things that I've had to deal with happened in my teenage years. In 7th and 8th grade, I went to a Catholic school, and we were doing activities for pro-life, because Catholics believe in pro-life. And this new kid from a different state knew that I was adopted. So I was sitting by myself at lunch one day, and he came up to me and told me I should be lucky I wasn't aborted. And I didn't really know what to say, because I was 13 at the time. So I kind of just sat there, like I kind of nodded. My mom was very upset, and I didn't really know what to do about that. So that's one thing that happened. To this day, it still like hits me. It's like really weird to think about, you know, like he actually said that to me. Like, no one has ever told me that before. Yeah, that was one thing that has happened to me. Another thing happened after my 17th birthday. There was a researcher who does research on twins that were separated in China through adoption, and he found a set of twins in my province who were found at the same place, brought to the same orphanage, and who are a day apart. And when my mom looked at it, she saw my Chinese name. And so we were like, oh my gosh, do I have a twin? And so we contacted all these groups, and finally we found the people on the other end of that list. We do not look anything alike. People say we might have the same nose, but we really don't look anything alike. But when I found out that information, these things started surfacing about adoption in China, and my world just turned upside down. I learned things that I'm glad I know, but it was very hard for me to process. It hit me that everything I've ever known about my life and my story could be a lie, and I've always grown up with that story. You know, like I always tell people the same story like I did in my last video, and when I found out all this information after hearing about my twin, it was like, oh my gosh, like what if everything I know could be a lie? What if these things aren't real? And it just made me think like, so then how did I end up here? Like what is going on? And so I have had to deal with that and basically trying to figure out what it means to me. I still don't know if I've fully processed it. I haven't really thought about it ever since I found out, but it was definitely hard for me to process. So those have been some of my struggles with adoption. Other than that, I've had a pretty good life. I haven't really had any other struggles. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out, you know, who I am, all this stuff. I still want to know things about my history. I hope maybe someday I might find out more about where I come from. But for now, I'm pretty happy where I am in my life journey as an adoptee, as a Chinese American, as a college student. My life is pretty great right now, and I wouldn't change any of it. I wouldn't change anything that's happened to me because it's all happened to me for a reason. So yeah, those were my struggles, and I've definitely started to overcome most of them, and I don't really know if I have any at the moment because I haven't really thought about it. I haven't really had like deep conversations about adoption in a while, but yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed sharing that more intimate side of me with you, and I hope that any adoptees out there could learn from it or gain from it. I really hope it helped you. If you have any questions for me, I'll answer them in the comments below. If you want advice on something, if you want to share anything with me, I would love to hear your stories and your comments and your views on what I have talked about in this video. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and turn on the bell notification so you know that every time I post a new video, which will be every Wednesday. We'll see you all next week. Bye.